The Robinson family got lost in space.
Yeah, the series was set in the far future, 1997.
1997.
Do you have a name?
My name's Will Robinson, sir. And I'm not a toy, I'm a boy.
Oh, nonsense, nonsense.
Lost in Space isn't just another piece of retro television, nostalgia gathering dust in the archives of classic TV. It's a treasure trove of Hollywood chaos, creative desperation, and accidental genius that somehow created one of the most memorable science fiction series of the 1960s. Most fans remember the campy humor, the robot's iconic warnings, and Dr. Smith's theatrical villainy. But the real story behind the cameras is far more fascinating than anything that made it to air. We're talking about a production where a live llama nearly destroyed an episode, where the most memorable character wasn't even supposed to exist, and where network executives made decisions that would reshape the entire landscape of science. Fiction television, from costly robot suits to recycled alien makeup. From romantic relationships blooming between child actors to a future Oscar-winning composer creating his first television masterpiece. Lost in Space was a perfect storm of ambition, budget constraints, and creative improvisation. The series began as a serious family drama about survival in space and somehow evolved into a comedy featuring talking vegetables and melodramatic villains. This transformation wasn't planned. It was the result of actor improvisation, network, pressure, and the kind of behind-the-scenes chaos that could only happen in the Wild West days of television production. Every episode was a small miracle of creative problem-solving, where props were endlessly recycled, costumes were designed to win awards, and actors found themselves trapped inside 200-pound robot suits, manually operating lights with their heads while delivering lines they could barely see through tiny viewing slots. The story of Lost in Space really begins with what didn't make it to television, the original pilot that would have given audiences a completely different show. No Place to Hide was the title of this unaired pilot, and it featured none of the elements that would make Lost in Space a cultural phenomenon. There was no Dr. Zachary Smith with his cowardly schemes and theatrical declarations. There was no robot with its flashing lights and memorable warnings. Instead, viewers would have encountered a straightforward family adventure story about the Robinsons and Major Don West embarking on a space colonization mission, only to be knocked off course by a random meteor storm. The tone was serious, grounded, and focused entirely on the family dynamics and survival challenges they would face in the vastness of space. Network executives watched this pilot and felt something was missing. The conflict wasn't personal enough, the danger wasn't immediate enough, and the characters needed more complexity. This led to one of the most significant, last-minute changes in television history. Dr. Smith was conceived as a saboteur who would create the crisis that stranded the family. While the robot was added as both a tool and a potential threat, these additions completely transformed the show's DNA. What had been a straightforward survival story became a complex web of internal conflict, comedy, and technological wonder. The irony is that these last-minute additions, born from network notes and creative panic, became the very elements that made Lost in Space unforgettable. Without Dr. Smith's sabotage, there would have been no dramatic launch sequence. Without the robot, there would have been no iconic catchphrases or mechanical comedy. The show that millions of fans remember and love was essentially a creative accident. A series of network-mandated changes that accidentally created television magic. Jonathan Harris's transformation of Dr. Smith. From disposable villain to scene-stealing, Icon represents one of the most successful acts of creative rebellion in television history. Originally conceived as a one-dimensional saboteur who would betray the Robinson family and disappear from the storyline, Dr. Smith was meant to be pure evil, a character whose treachery would set the plot in motion and then fade into the background. Harris, however, saw potential that the writers had missed. Instead of playing Smith as a straightforward villain, he began incorporating elements of vanity, cowardice, and theatrical self-importance that made the character simultaneously despicable and entertaining. Harris drew from his classical theater background, treating Smith's dialogue like Shakespearean soliloquies and infusing every line with melodramatic flair. The pain became more than just a catchphrase. It was a window into Harris's understanding of the character as someone who saw himself as the tragic hero of his own story. Constantly wronged by circumstances and surrounded by people who failed to appreciate his brilliance. The producers initially worried that Harris was making the character too comedic, too over the top for a series that was supposed to maintain some dramatic tension. However, as the show's tone shifted toward family-friendly adventure, Harris's interpretation proved to be exactly what the series needed. His Dr. Smith became the perfect foil for the Ernest Robinson family, sophisticated enough to seem dangerous, cowardly enough to be ultimately harmless, and entertaining enough to steal every scene he entered. This character evolution had profound effects on the entire series structure. Episodes began to revolve around Smith's schemes and the chaos they created. With the Robinson family reacting to his latest betrayal or ridiculous plan, Harris's success with the role also influenced how other characters were written and performed, pushing the entire series in a more comedic direction that would define its legacy. Behind the scenes, Jonathan Harris proved to be as clever and calculating as his on-screen alter ego, making a power move that would separate him from every other actor on the series. When he joined Lost in Space, Harris made an unusual request that revealed his deep understanding of both the entertainment industry and his own worth as a performer. Instead of accepting standard billing as a regular cast member, Harris demanded to be credited as a special guest star in every single episode. This was virtually unheard of for someone appearing in every episode of a television series. Guest star billing was typically reserved for actors making occasional appearances or major celebrities making special appearances. Harris understood that this credit would accomplish several important goals. First, it would make him stand out from the ensemble cast in the minds of viewers and industry professionals. Second, it would suggest that his character was so important and his performance so exceptional that the show needed to highlight his presence as something special. Third, it would give him additional leverage in contract negotiations and industry recognition. The producers agreed to this unusual arrangement, perhaps not fully understanding how effectively it would cement Harris's status as the breakout star of the series. Every week, as viewers saw special guest star Jonathan Harris, the credit reinforced the idea that Dr. Smith was not just another character but the star attraction of the show. This billing became an extension of the character's own inflated ego, just as Dr. Smith believed he was superior to everyone around him. The credits suggested that Harris was in a category above his fellow actors. The strategy worked brilliantly, making Harris and Dr. Smith memorable in ways that transcended the show itself. It was a masterclass in personal branding within the context of ensemble television, and it demonstrated how a savvy performer could manipulate the very structure of television credits to enhance their career and their character's impact. While Lost in Space presented the adventures of a family lost in the vastness of space, a different kind of story was unfolding behind the cameras. A real-life romance that would add genuine emotion to the on-screen relationships between the younger cast members. Billy Mumy, who played the curious and adventurous Will Robinson, and Angela Cartwright, who portrayed his sister Penny, developed a friendship during the early seasons that gradually blossomed into something deeper as they matured. Working together for 3 seasons, often in scenes that required them to support each other through dangerous or emotional situations, the 2 young actors formed a bond that extended far beyond their professional relationship. By the time Mumy was old enough to drive, he and Cartwright were seriously dating, their relationship having evolved naturally from childhood friendship to teenage romance. This wasn't just a casual relationship or a fleeting attraction. They were together for several years, long after Lost in Space had ended and they had moved on to other projects. At one point, they were even engaged, a detail that remained largely unknown to fans and the general public for decades. Their relationship was built on a foundation of shared experiences that few people could understand. They had essentially grown up together in the unique environment of a television production, facing the challenges of child stardom while maintaining their education and personal development. The romance added an extra layer of authenticity to their on-screen chemistry, particularly in scenes where Will and Penny had to rely on each other or show concern for each other's safety. Although they eventually grew apart romantically, as many young couples do, Mumy and Cartwright maintained a close friendship that lasted throughout their adult lives. They would often appear together at Lost in Space conventions and reunions. Their easy rapport and obvious affection for each other, delighting fans who sensed that their on-screen sibling relationship had been built on something genuine. This behind-the-scenes romance represents one of the most touching human stories to emerge from the Lost in Space experience. Reminder that beneath all the science fiction spectacle and campy humor, the series was ultimately about the relationships between people facing extraordinary circumstances together. The technical achievements of Lost in Space often get overshadowed by its campier elements. But the series represented a significant investment in both practical effects and authentic scientific equipment that set it apart from other science fiction productions of its era. Producer Irwin Allen made the radical decision to incorporate actual computer equipment into the Jupiter set, specifically Burroughs B205 computers that were cutting-edge technology in the 1950s and 1960s. These weren't mock-ups or cardboard props designed to look futuristic. They were real, functioning computers that had been used by government agencies and research institutions. Allen understood that audiences could sense the difference between authentic equipment and cheap imitations, and he was willing to invest significantly in creating a convincing high-tech environment. The Burroughs B205 computers provided the Jupiter 2 with blinking lights, complex control panels, and the kind of sophisticated appearance that made the spacecraft feel genuinely advanced rather than like a television studio set decorated with cardboard and Christmas lights. The computers weren't actually operational during filming, but their presence gave the sets a weight and authenticity that impressed both viewers and visiting industry professionals. This attention to detail extended beyond just the computer equipment. Allen insisted on high-quality materials, professional-grade lighting systems, and construction techniques that would hold up under the intense scrutiny of television cameras. The Jupiter 2 interior set cost approximately $350,000 to construct, making it one of the most expensive television sets of its time, comparable to major motion picture productions. Within the fictional world of the series, the Jupiter 2 was valued at an astronomical $30 billion, a figure that emphasized the importance of the Robinson family's mission and the advanced nature of their technology. This contrast between the real-world production cost and the fictional value of the spacecraft illustrated Allen's commitment to creating something that felt authentic and valuable to audiences. The investment in real equipment and high-quality construction paid off in the form of a set that looked convincingly futuristic and sophisticated, helping to ground the more fantastical elements of the series in something that felt technologically plausible. The robot B9 stands as one of the most impressive technical achievements in television history, a costume that represented both a massive financial investment and an incredible physical challenge for the performer who brought it to life. Designed by Robert Kinoshita, who had previously created Robbie the Robot for the classic film Forbidden Planet. The robot costume was constructed from fiberglass and intricate metal components at a cost of $70,000, an astronomical figure. For a 1960s television production that represented roughly the equivalent of $500,000 in today's money, the suit weighed nearly 200 pounds, making it one of the heaviest costumes ever used in television production, and presented enormous challenges for any performer brave enough to climb inside. Stuntman Bob May got the job not because of his acting ability or his voice, but simply because he was one of the few people who could physically fit inside the bulky contraption and still managed to move around the set. Wearing the robot suit was an exercise in endurance and precision that few viewers could have imagined. May had extremely limited visibility through small viewing slots, virtually no ventilation in the enclosed fiberglass shell, and had to memorize all of his movements precisely because he couldn't see where he was going or what he was doing. The suit's famous blinking torso lights weren't controlled by any sophisticated electronics or remote systems. Instead, May had to manually activate them by pressing a hidden button with his head while simultaneously performing his physical actions and coordinating with the separately recorded dialogue provided by voice actor Dick Tufeld. Every movement, every gesture, every turn of the robot's head required careful planning and physical coordination that made the performance as much of an athletic feat as an acting challenge. May often endured hours inside the sweltering, claustrophobic suit, emerging exhausted and dehydrated after filming sequences that might last only a few minutes on screen. The physical demands were so intense that the production team had to carefully schedule robot scenes to prevent May from suffering heat exhaustion or injury. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, the robot became one of the most beloved and memorable characters in science fiction television. Proof that sometimes the most impressive performances come from the most difficult and unglamorous circumstances. The relationship between Lost in Space and Star Trek goes far deeper than their shared status as classic science fiction television, extending into the practical realities of 1960s television production where resourcefulness often mattered more than originality. Both series were produced during the same era, often using the same pool of makeup artists, special effects technicians, prop designers who moved between different studio productions as work became available. This shared creative community led to some fascinating cross-pollination between the two series, most notably in the area of alien makeup and prosthetics. The episode The Haunted Lighthouse featured aliens with pointed ears that looked remarkably similar to the Vulcan makeup used in Star Trek. And this wasn't a coincidence. It was a deliberate cost-cutting measure. Rather than creating entirely new prosthetic molds from scratch, the Lost in Space makeup team simply borrowed materials and techniques from the Star Trek production, modifying them slightly to fit their own narrative needs. This kind of resource sharing was common in the television industry of the 1960s, when budgets were tight and schedules were demanding. Productions routinely shared costumes, props, makeup techniques, and even entire set pieces, with items being repainted, modified, or repurposed to serve different narrative functions. The irony is that, while Lost in Space and Star Trek were positioned as competitors in the marketplace, fighting for the same science fiction audience and often compared unfavorably to each other by critics and fans, behind the scenes they were collaborating in practical ways that help both series achieve their visual goals within their budget constraints. This sharing of resources created an unexpected connection between the two series that went beyond their superficial similarities. In a very literal sense, Lost in Space aliens were wearing pieces of Star Trek, creating a kind of invisible crossover that linked two of the most important science fiction series in television history. The practice also highlights the collaborative nature of television production during this era, when shows were made by small communities of specialized craftspeople who worked across multiple projects and shared their expertise freely. The production philosophy of Lost in Space was built on creative recycling and visual ingenuity that turned budget constraints into opportunities for innovation. In the expensive world of 1960s science fiction television, where every episode demanded new alien worlds, advanced technology, and futuristic equipment, the production team developed sophisticated strategies for maximizing their resources through clever reuse and repurposing of props, costumes, and set pieces. This wasn't occasional corner cutting, it was a core production strategy that allowed the series to maintain its ambitious visual scope while staying within television budget constraints. Props like scientific scanners, control panels, communication devices, and alien artifacts were routinely repainted, modified, and repositioned to serve different narrative functions across multiple episodes. A single scanning device might appear in 3 or 4 different episodes, each time presented as a completely different piece of technology through the magic of creative set dressing, strategic camera angles, and modified paint schemes. Practice extended to costumes, set pieces, and even entire alien designs, with makeup and wardrobe departments developing modular approaches that allowed them to create seemingly new looks by combining and recombining existing elements. Most viewers never noticed these repetitions, thanks to the skill of the production team in presenting familiar items in new contexts and the episodic nature of television viewing, where audiences weren't likely to compare details across multiple episodes. The recycling strategy also fostered a culture of innovation within the production team, as designers and craftspeople were constantly challenged to find new ways to use existing materials. This led to creative solutions that were often more interesting and visually appealing than anything they could have created with unlimited resources. Set decorators became experts at transforming the same basic elements into completely different environments, while costume designers developed techniques for making the same basic garments look futuristic, alien, or technologically advanced. Depending on the episode's needs, the approach also created a subtle visual continuity across the series, as repeated elements helped establish the technological consistency of the Lost in Space universe. Even when audiences weren't consciously aware of the connections, this creative recycling represents one of the most successful examples of budget-conscious production in television history, proving that limitations can inspire innovation and that skilled craftspeople can create impressive results with minimal resources. Lost in Space earned recognition for excellence that extended far beyond its entertainment value, particularly in the realm of costume design, where the series achieved both critical acclaim and industry recognition that validated its artistic ambitions. In 1968, costume designer Paul Zestubnevich received an award from the Costume Designers Guild for his innovative work on the series. It's an honor that highlighted the sophisticated approach the production team took toward creating a convincing, futuristic world. The Zestubnevich's designs weren't just functional clothing for the actors, they were integral elements of the show's visual storytelling that helped establish character relationships, suggest technological advancement, and create the otherworldly atmosphere that made Lost in Space memorable. His approach to costume design embraced the space-age aesthetic that was popular in 1960s fashion and design, incorporating silver fabrics, geometric patterns, and synthetic materials that suggested advanced manufacturing techniques and futuristic sensibilities. The costumes evolved throughout the series' run, reflecting both the changing tone of the show and the natural progression of the character's journey through space. Early season costumes emphasized the practical, scientific nature of the Robinson family's mission, with clothing that suggested functionality and durability suitable for space exploration. As the series shifted toward more adventurous and comedic storylines, the costumes became more varied and visually striking, incorporating bold colors and dramatic silhouettes that enhanced the theatrical nature of the performances. Zestubnevich understood that costume design in science fiction television served multiple functions beyond simple character identification. The clothing had to suggest technological advancement, cultural sophistication, and the kind of future society that could mount interstellar colonization missions. His work created visual consistency across the series, while allowing for individual character expression and the practical demands of television production. The award recognition was significant because costume design for television, particularly science fiction television, was rarely acknowledged by industry organizations during this era. Most awards' attention went to dramatic series or variety shows, with genre productions like Lost in Space often dismissed as children's entertainment. Unworthy of serious artistic consideration, Zestubnevich's award helped legitimize science fiction television as a venue for serious creative work, and established Lost in Space as a production that achieved excellence in multiple technical and artistic areas. The casting decisions that shaped Lost in Space created a complex web of professional relationships and personal dynamics that would influence both the series' creative direction and the long-term careers of its performers. Guy Williams, who played patriarch John Robinson, came to the series with significant expectations based on his successful starring role in the adventure series Zorro. Williams approached Lost in Space as an opportunity to lead another family-friendly adventure series, expecting to be the central figure in stories that balance science fiction elements with genuine dramatic tension and character development. During the first season, Williams' expectations seemed justified. John Robinson was clearly the leader of the family, the decision-maker in crisis situations, and the character around whom most of the serious dramatic moments revolved. However, as the series evolved and the popularity of Jonathan Harris's Dr. Smith became apparent, the focus gradually shifted away from Williams and toward the comedic possibilities created by Smith's schemes and his interactions with the robot. This shift was not just a matter of screen time, it represented a fundamental change in the series' tone and priorities that left Williams feeling increasingly marginalized and frustrated. Williams was a classically trained actor who took his craft seriously and preferred material that allowed him to explore genuine human emotions and conflicts. as Lost in Space became more comedic and fantastical, with episodes featuring talking, vegetables, ridiculous alien encounters, and increasingly absurd plot developments. Williams found himself relegated to the background, often serving as little more than a straight man for Harris's theatrical performances. The transformation was particularly difficult because Williams had initially been attracted to the series by its potential for serious science fiction storytelling and its focus on family relationships under extraordinary stress. By the final season, Williams felt so disconnected from the direction of the series that he began to withdraw, both professionally and personally, from the Hollywood entertainment industry. After Lost in Space ended, Williams made the decision to retire from acting and move to Argentina, where he had developed a significant fan following and where he could live quietly away from the pressures and disappointments of the American television industry. His departure represented a significant loss for the entertainment industry and illustrated the challenges that serious, dramatic actors faced when working in genre television that was constantly evolving to meet changing audience expectations and network demands. The voice work that brought the Lost in Space robot to life represents one of the most successful collaborations in television history. Combining the physical performance skills of Bob May with the distinctive vocal talents of Dick Tufeld II, create a character that transcended its mechanical origins. Tufeld's contribution to Lost in Space extended far beyond his iconic work as the robot's voice. He also served as the series' narrator, providing the authoritative, dramatic voiceover that introduced and concluded each episode.
Wow.
This dual role made Tufeld an integral part of the show's identity, even though he never appeared on screen and was rarely recognized by casual viewers. His narration helped establish the serious, adventure-oriented tone that the series maintained even during its most comedic episodes, providing a sense of dramatic weight and continuity that grounded the more fantastical elements of the storytelling. Tufeld was already an established voice actor and radio announcer when he joined Lost in Space, bringing years of experience in creating compelling vocal performances that could convey complex emotions and information without the benefit of physical presence or facial expressions. His approach to the robot's voice was carefully calibrated to suggest mechanical precision while maintaining enough emotional range to make the character sympathetic and engaging. The famous warning danger, Will Robinson, became one of the most recognizable catchphrases in television history, largely because of Tufeld's ability to invest those simple words with genuine urgency and concern. His vocal performance suggested that the robot, despite its mechanical nature, had developed genuine affection for the Robinson family, and particularly for young Will Robinson. This emotional connection between machine and humans became one of the series' most compelling recurring themes, exploring questions about artificial intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of friendship that were remarkably sophisticated for 1960s television. Tufeld's work as narrator provided crucial context and continuity for a series that often jumped between wildly different tones and storylines from episode to episode. His authoritative delivery helped viewers accept the premise that they were watching serious science fiction adventure, even when the episodes featured talking vegetables or absurd alien encounters. The combination of his narrative voice and his robot characterization made Tufeld an unseen but essential presence that helped define the Lost in Space experience for millions of viewers. The behind-the-scenes story of Lost in Space reaches its most fascinating chapter in the revelation that the series' memorable theme music was composed by a young musician who would later become one of the most celebrated composers in entertainment history. John Williams, known at the time as Johnny Williams, was only 33 years old when he was hired to create the musical identity for Lost in Space, making this one of his earliest major television credits and a crucial stepping stone in his journey toward legendary status. The producers approached Williams with a challenging brief. They needed music that would sound futuristic and adventurous, while remaining accessible and memorable enough to work effectively as a television theme. Williams responded with a bold orchestral composition that stood out dramatically from the typical television music of the 1960s, most of which relied on simple melodies, electronic effects, or stock musical libraries. His Lost in Space theme featured the sweeping, orchestral arrangements, dramatic crescendos, memorable melodic themes that would later become hallmarks of his most famous film scores. The music was remarkably ambitious for television production, requiring a full orchestra and sophisticated recording techniques that were more commonly associated with major motion pictures than weekly television series. Williams' approach to the Lost in Space score reflected his classical training and his intuitive understanding that science fiction storytelling could support music of genuine emotional depth and complexity. Even when episodes veered into comedic territory or featured absurd plot developments, Williams' music maintained a sense of epic adventure and family drama that helped audiences take the series seriously. His themes suggested vast cosmic spaces, technological wonder, and the emotional bonds between family members facing extraordinary challenges together. The opening theme in particular became one of the most recognizable pieces of television music ever created, instantly evoking the excitement and mystery of space exploration, while suggesting the warmth and resilience of the Robinson family. Williams' work on Lost in Space served as an important laboratory for techniques and approaches he would later refine in his legendary film scores for Star Wars, Jaws, E.T., Indiana Jones, and countless other classics. The experience taught him how to create music that could enhance storytelling without overwhelming it, how to develop memorable themes that could be varied and developed across multiple episodes, and how to balance spectacular orchestral effects with intimate emotional moments. Lost in Space represented more than just another television assignment for Williams. It was a crucial chapter in his artistic development that helped prepare him for the cinematic achievements that would make him one of the most important composers of the 20th century.